Stuck in the Middle podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers? It is time for another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck. And some of you may recall last week, I had my beautiful bride on the show, celebrating our wedding anniversary. I thought she'd be the perfect guest to have on the show. In part because of our little bit of age difference, we had some different tastes in music, particularly during our high school years. Now, one of the bands that she had mentioned was a band called Toad the Wet Sprocket. Now, admittedly, in my high school years, they had already come into fruition and were definitely becoming more and more of a hit band. I think they were one of those 120 minutes bands that were gradually going out into the mainstream. So certainly, definitely in the category of alternative rock. But during my high school years, as you've heard from multiple episodes now, I was into a very different type of music. And I realized that I'm not into inherently happy music other than ska. I kind of like heavy stuff, more often than not, but not exclusively, because some of the things that we've talked about on the show have been, pop and classic and oldies and all those kind of things. However, what was very interesting is that we recorded the podcast on Tuesday. Now, I was off of work on Friday, and I get a text from my wife who says, "Hey, I need to talk to you about a thing this weekend." So I'm like, okay. Now we have, 3 kids and a very active life with them in particular. So I really wasn't sure what this was about. So we start to chat, and she goes, "So, funny story. You know how we talked on the podcast about Toad the Wet Sprocket?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." Now, I don't want to name drop or get into specifics of who the individuals are that are involved. However, I will just say that my wife has some networks for what she does for a living and people that she's interacted with throughout the years that have had some kind of connection to Toad the Wet Sprocket. And she says, "How would you feel about going to go see Toad the Wet Sprocket in Boston?" Now, we live about 20-ish miles north of Boston. We don't get into the city anywhere near as much as we would like. I think the last time I was down there was for a Celtics playoff game. And I'm like, you know what? That sounds fun. In part because of what the different relationships were and who the individuals were that were involved. I'm like, you know what? That sounds like a lot of fun. And she goes, "Well, they're not the only band that's playing." So if anyone saw my Instagram or Facebook post, I went to this past Sunday, just 2 days ago, what can only be described as one of the most prototypically Gen X concerts that you could possibly imagine. Now, I say that as prototypical, depending on where you are on the Gen X spectrum, which comes up from time to time, and also in a couple of Facebook groups that I'm on, as far as the early Gen Xers versus the mid to late Gen Xers, as far as what they're interested in. But any of the music from that late 80s, 90s to mid 90s, to me, as I mentioned in episode 1, is like this peak Gen X, at least from my perspective. So get this, slackers. Toad the Wet Sprocket, the Gin Blossoms, and Barenaked Ladies for the last tour on Earth. The last tour on Earth is what it's been named. And like many bands, they've had to reschedule this a couple of times because of COVID. Now, these are not bands that I would have necessarily sought out. However, here's this opportunity. So what's interesting is sometimes, I don't want to say discouraged. It's the wrong word. But sometimes like, gosh, week after week, I'm recording this content. I don't know if anyone's listening. Now I know I have a few of you who are recurring listeners each and every week, and I so appreciate that. And even the people who just pop in from time to time based upon a topic that they're interested in. And really, it's all across the globe for at least a couple of listens here or there. So again, for all of you who check this out, thank you. But when you have these little serendipities, these little interesting moments where I have my wife on the podcast on a Tuesday, and on Friday, one of the bands that she talked about just happens to fall into our laps, into our city. My wife and I met in Boston. Our kids were born in Boston. How is it? It's those things that make me say, gosh, this podcast is something I need to continue to do because these kind of things don't just happen every day. And I was like, let's do this. Now, we had the opportunity to bring guests. We really wanted our kids to go because it would have been their first concert. And knowing their dad is a Gen X podcaster and just some of the music that they listen to with us and appreciate with us. But no, they were teenagers and we try not to be like, you have to go, and then have them sit there and be miserable. Although I will say they would not have been miserable. So nevertheless, the missus and I, we pop into our car and we head down to the city of Boston at the beautiful Leader Bank Pavilion. Now, the Leader Bank Pavilion is a amphitheater. It's an outdoor venue that's really like these huge sail type tents. And it's right on the waterfront in Boston. It's right by the World Trade Center. And it's such a cool place to see a show. Now, it's had a bunch of different names throughout the years as all these banks get bought out and bought out and bought out. I think the first concert that I saw there was Radiohead. Phenomenal, as you can imagine. And this, I don't even think OK Computer was out yet. I think it was around the bends. But such a cool venue. And the last time I was there was for the Faith No More reunion concert, which was just a killer show. No opening act, just them killing it. And I believe the venue seats about 5,000 people. So really good size venue and just a great place to see music. And it's just great to be down there in that part of the city anyway. So here we are. It went from being, we were going to have a couple of guests, maybe our kids, to a date night in the city. So I did post a video that said I would be maybe doing some recaps or popping in at various times throughout the evening. I'll have to tell you, and maybe this is where I'm somewhat unserious as far as, really churning out content. I just wanted to enjoy the show because this turned out to be one of the most enjoyable evenings that I could have imagined having. When I went into it, not really necessarily being this big, huge fan of these particular bands, but also B, not like thinking I was going to even know a fraction of their discography. I couldn't have been more wrong about that. So we get there, find our seats, great seats. We are, we're on the floor. Well, it's all floor there. But we're in the covered section. I think we're, 14 rows back, something like that. I forget exactly, but not too far. Great view of the stage. And there's an individual that we're going to interact with. Again, I'm not going to name drop. And I'll just say that we had an opportunity, but due to COVID protocols, had to keep our distance, had the opportunity to meet Glenn Phillips, who is the lead singer for Toad the Wet Sprocket. Just the nicest, down-to-earth guy. We only had a few minutes, super friendly, and was really, he didn't need to do this. So we were initially going to be going to a VIP meet and greet. Unfortunately, there was some confusion and some paperwork and some emails. And it is what it is. But nevertheless, because we missed the VIP, he was kind enough just to come out and spend a couple of minutes with us and say hi. And I said to him, my wife has seen you on multiple occasions. I'm really excited to see you guys in concert for the first time. And Maggie did bring up, my wife Maggie says, hey, I saw you, a few times back in the day at the legendary Ranch Bowl in Omaha, Nebraska. He's like, oh yeah, the Ranch Bowl. Super great guy. And this was 10 minutes out from them going on stage. It's one of those things. I'm sure there are bands out there that wouldn't take the time. So just a huge shout out and thank you to Glenn Phillips. You couldn't have been more gracious with your time as you're about to go out on stage. So thank you. I'm sure he's not going to hear this, but still, I just want to say thank you for taking that time with us. So we grab our drinks and we go and we sit down and just wait. And before you know it, the show begins. Now, like I said, this is an amphitheater, so it's a pretty good sized stage. It's a very, very good sized stage and a great venue, like I said. And Toad the Wet Sprocket begins to play. Now, I can't say I'm good with their names because I don't know the names of the song necessarily. But as they're going along, I'm like, wait a minute. I know that song. Oh, I know that song. Whoa, I know that one. Hey, that's a good one. And I'm just going, wow, they're really tight. Tons of guitars, by the way. I'm always just, entranced when they're switching out guitars, and a lot of Telecasters on the stage. And I love Teles. I don't have an actual Fender Telecaster. I do have a Harley Benton. Anyone who knows Harley Benton is out of Europe. They make great knockoffs, if you will, great price point, and they play beautifully. But get this. When you take a look at songs 7, 9, 10, and 11. So they had an 11 song set. There's a cover in between. But you go from All I Want, huge hit, All I Want is to Be With You, Something's Always Wrong, Fall Down, and Walk on the Ocean. That is an absolutely killer set with hit after hit after hit. Now, when I talk about hits, and I've talked about it before on the podcast, that's kind of I don't want to say a misnomer, but there are multiple charts within Billboard, and it's not just about the Hot 100. There are the independent charts. There's the mainstream radio charts. There's the alternative rock charts. Regardless, MTV was a huge factor at this time period. All of those songs had regular radio play. So think about that. All I Want, Something's Always Wrong, Fall Down, Walk on the Ocean. Killer set. I'm blown away. They're tight as hell. They sound phenomenal. And I'm just like, wow, I don't even know what to say. It's not what I necessarily expected. Now, as you can imagine, they're the opening act in this particular scenario. So there's not this big, huge, elaborate show. A very simple backdrop with some graphics, but it's all with the Toad the Wet Sprocket logo with some different things in between. And a very stripped down stage. Very simple. And they're not going to go ahead and try to upstage anyone necessarily. So it was a very straightforward set. There was some call to action, sing along, because the songs are very memorable and hook heavy. But they were just this solid opening act. So at this point, we had considered, great, we really came for Toad the Wet Sprocket. We've seen them, they rocked, we met Glenn, cool. Maybe we bail, go get some dinner, spend some time in the city. We're like, let's just hang around and, we'll grab something to eat here, grab another drink. So we do. Now, I mentioned that the set was really stripped down. So the swap between sets, between the Toad Wet Sprocket and the Gin Blossoms was super quick. So I think we're still in line getting our food when they begin to play. So both Maggie and I were like, well, we know them. They weren't necessarily on either one of our regular rotation playlists. They weren't even a band that, Maggie had been listening to, back at that time when she was listening to bands like Toad and Big Head Todd and all that. But then they start playing the set list. And we're standing there and go, wow, I know like every single one of these songs. Because part of what we talked about was, okay, what's the order of the acts and how did this come to be? Now, obviously, when you're signing a contract to do a tour, there's the business side of things, right? Which is who gets to open for who and what is it? Is it radio play? Is it hit singles? Is it album sales? Like, what is it? So I mentioned those last 4 songs from Toad the Wet Sprocket being instantly memorable and recognizable. There was like every song, for the most part, the Gin Blossoms played that were like, I think we know all of these. So their set list, so they played 9 songs, and it seemed like they played less, honestly. Maybe just the length of their songs. I'm not sure exactly. But let's see. They played Follow You Down, Long Time Gone, Allison Road, As Long as It Matters, Mrs. Rita, Until I Fall Away, Found Out About You, Hey Jealousy, Till I Hear It From You. And you just go, wow, those are all hits. All hits. Particularly if you were there in the 90s. Really shocked. I was really shocked. They were very tight. I'm forgetting the singer's name. I can look that up. They were very, and this isn't meant to be a disparaging comment. They were very workmanlike, like very professional. Like they are professional musicians, and they get out there and they just do it. They do their thing. They're like in and out. But there was also some, there was stage banter, many sing-alongs. Robin Wilson. He's the lead vocalist. So I apologize for not, having his name right. And he's 1965. He is a Gen Xer. And what surprised me a little bit, he's just covered in tattoos. And he's wearing a Soul Asylum t-shirt, which, of course, Maggie instantly said, oh my gosh, Soul Asylum, because she had mentioned how much she loved Soul Asylum on the show. And and this is where it's not meant to be disparaging, because they were really tight. They were really good. But I'm like, it's just perfunctory, maybe is the word. Now, this is important a little bit later on, because I comment to Maggie. I'm like, yeah, they're good. They're solid. Went to go get another drink or whatever. And, we're shooting the breeze. And one of the things that I think separates certain bands, or any band really, from any other, is just love of the game, right? Now, I think that if you are still touring in 2022, 30, 40, whatever many years later, there's a certain love of the game. And there's also certain bands that have reached a certain point where they don't need to tour. Like they don't need to. The Rolling Stones have more money than they'll ever need. Yet everyone who's ever seen them, and I have not, will tell you that they bring it for like 2 or 3 hours. And they're like in their 70s. Paul McCartney. Why does Paul McCartney need to do this? He doesn't. He doesn't need to do this. Loves it. Loves it. Now, I can see that there's a difference between being an opening act or a mid-set act, whatever it is, from being the headliner. But I just have to say, a band that I never embraced, and this is where I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, other than ska, some of the pop, in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, I liked that cathartic, like emotional music, that punk and grunge and metal, right? Once I moved past the hair bands and Guns N' Roses kind of being that logical foray into heavier, darker music, and then Metallica and Anthrax became just such a huge part of my palette. And I mentioned the Faith No Mores, and then, you know, the grunge acts come out and all of that. So we mentioned, Carlos and I, we talked about like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Fun band. Their biggest hit is Melancholy. Under the Bridge is a melancholy song. My favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers song sounds maybe fun, but that's Knock You Down. It's a heavy song about loss, about grief, about drug addiction. So I'm just not necessarily instantly attracted to happy music. The Barenaked Ladies make happy music. But again, thinking about the time frame and the music that I've mentioned liking. So here you have guys that are in similar age ranges with similar influences. The kind of things that I always found interesting about music, the possibilities for mashups. So here's a band that the guys are all not early Xers, but like 70s, right? So I think late 60s, 70s. I think the youngest member is like maybe mid 70s, I think. I'm talking about years, like 1970s. And here's this band, and they're this quirky Canadian band, and they're full of enthusiasm, and they're kind of fun, and they kind of rap, but they're kind of folky. Like, what is this, right? So maybe I was just too cynical in my teens and 20s. But what I'm getting at is the Barenaked Ladies, they love to play music. They love to perform. And I just have to say, I was sleeping on this band. I don't recall how long they played, but let me tell you, the enthusiasm, the joy is the word. When you have a joy after playing 30 years, right? And they do a new record every few years, but a lot of the bands don't even do that necessarily. You're playing the same hits, and we'll use that Rolling Stones. They are still playing songs from the 60s, right? Still playing these songs 6 years later. But acting like it just no time has gone by. That was this show. I was dumbfounded by how much fun I was having. And I was also astounded once again at how many songs I knew. Just they're out there in the ether and you don't know it. And the songs are just somewhere in the back of your mind. They just exist. They just killed it. Like absolutely killed it. Much more of a light show. They are the headliner, but they're all multi-instrumentalists. Like they're literally exchanging, instruments. When you're ostensibly your lead singer, although they all sing lead, but your main lead singer has his own drum kit that comes out at certain points so that he can play the drums. You know why? So their drummer can sing. Their bass player, who also sings, is just bouncing around the stage. And I talked about that enthusiasm, right? Clearly loving every single minute that he's on the stage. And clearly really enjoying the interaction with the fans. So the current lineup is Ed Robertson. He's the lead singer, guitarist, songwriter. Jim Cregan is your bassist and also backup vocalist, but also occasional lead singer. You have Tyler Stewart on drums, who also comes out, sings lead. And then Kevin Hearn, who is like just a multi-instrumentalist in and of himself, where he's playing guitar and keyboards and I'm sure some program stuff in there, but they all take a turn doing different things. Joy. It was just pure joy. So apparently they released a record recently, and if you go to the Apple Music Essentials, it's like the first song on the list, which apparently is getting a ton of airplay, fit right in with the set. And when you have new songs, when you're this far into your career that people are embracing and loving and singing along to, you're doing something right. So they come out with New Disaster, and then It's All Been Done. I know that one, right? Pinch Me, Gonna Walk, Big Backyard, right? Big Backyard. That's also a song off the new record, I believe. Roll Out, Here Together, Odds Are, Live Well, Life in a Nutshell. Now, I don't know all the song titles and can compare it to the songs themselves, but Man-Made Lake, Internal Dynamo, Brian Wilson, I know that one. Good Life, I know that one. Looking Up. Then they break out the Big Bang Theory theme, because they do the Big Bang Theory song. 1 Week, If I Had $1 Million, Barenaked Rap, and they have just kept going. They did an interlude at one part when they came out, and they just did some Led Zeppelin. Just 'cause. Whole Lot of Love. I mean, just imagine like the crowd's there and, bopping along. Hey, fun stuff. That was the drummer singing on that one. I gotta say, I'm still flabbergasted at how good it really was. Like, the place is packed. Like I said, it's like, 5,000 seat capacity. I mean, there might have been a pocket here or there. Like, that's with every show. But this was a packed house, enthusiastic fans. And one of the things that they mentioned, and I'm not surprised by this, they talked about Boston being one of their strongholds. And they've played it like every year since the 90s, from the smallest clubs to the biggest arenas. And that's also such a testament to them. So quick sidebar. So the missus keeps telling me throughout this night, I told you they were so good. And I think she saw them back in the day too, or something like that. She's like, they're so good. I've told you. So there was a coworker of ours. She was a director of human resources. And in her office, there was Barenaked Ladies stuff, swag, posters, signed poster. That is her favorite band. I'm always like looking at the posters. Now, this is 20 some odd years ago now. And I'm just like, I don't get it. Right. At the time I'm listening to like Shudder to Think or whatever. And probably around that time, listening to Fugazi a lot. That End Hits era. And I'm just like, I don't get it. She loves them. That's great. Lo and behold, we're sitting in our seats, and I think it's sometime during the Gin Blossom set that I see said director of human resources walk in with a couple of my other colleagues from back in the day. So just no opportunity to go over there, say hi, whatever. And gosh, would they even recognize me? I look completely different. So does Maggie. We both worked with all these people. So after the show, we're heading out. There they are, like right out in front. I think they're either deciding what they're going to do for the night, or they're saying their goodbyes and going their separate ways. And I just go up and I'm like, hi. Oh my gosh. You know how it is when you haven't seen someone in such a long time. And I just looked at her. I go, you were talking about them for all those years ago saying they were just the best, I got to tell you, you were right. That was an amazing show. So now, in my opinion, it gets even better. Obligatory, for the encore, right? Everyone's clapping. Come on back. Come on back. Big fun, right? Do the whole thing. Except they come out with members of both opening bands and proceed to do a phenomenal rendition of the Traveling Wilburys, Handle with Care. And just like the Traveling Wilburys, they each took a turn on the lead vocals, and Robin Wilson from the Gin Blossoms got to play the Roy Orbison role, which is so cool. And they finished the set with all the other bands. Now, first of all, they don't need to do that. The encore is for them. They're the headliner, right? And maybe they come out and they do the song with the other bands, and then the other bands leave the stage, and then they do their big finale or whatever it is. But no, they end the set with everyone together, which just demonstrates such a camaraderie and such a respect between the bands, and recognizing that they kind of occupy this very particular space in musical history, in genre in a way, because they're all pretty positive, right? A lot of love and upbeat stuff, and just truly one of the most fun, like purely fun concerts that I've been to in either a really long time or possibly ever. Now, it's hard to compare, because when you're young and you go see Metallica, yeah, it's not about happy music. It's about the vibe of the show, right? It's just so awesome to see them, this spectacle. So cool. I remember going to see Kiss. Kiss is just a big show. Now, Kiss is kind of fun, so maybe that's not the best example. But I can think of, all those punk and indie bands that I would go and see. And the vibe was fun most of the time, but the music wasn't necessarily about positive things or positive feelings. It was this expression sometimes of rage, an expression of sadness, or heartbreak. But to see a show that is equal parts happy messages and happy performance, and the enthusiasm of the performers, so great. Now, admittedly, the crowd skewed pretty old. Now I say old, just right in our wheelhouse, right? So, people in their close to 60s, down through their 40s. Some parents dragged their kids to the show, which we did not. And that's part of the reason that we regretted it. We should have just made them come. They would have had a blast. Like, honestly, they would have had a blast. But, yeah, I mean, it was our people. Now, I really tried to get some podcast swag made, just like even a t-shirt with just the podcast logo, because I have to get better about being just a shameless shill. And, I wasn't. And part of it, like when I'm having such a good time, so I'm not like doing messages between sets and, recording little videos. And part of it is like, I don't want to be obnoxious to the people who are around me. And, I guess if I want to do this, I kind of have to do those things. because it is about content production, and it is about presenting this stuff in a different way other than just in the podcast. So that's why I really wanted to make sure that I did the video and kind of welcome everyone. Hey, here's this kick-ass Gen X show. It's going to be a blast. So I am going to post. I'm trying to make, so again, I've been having challenges in making video content. I feel stupid, honestly, that I can't figure out some of this stuff. And some of it is just finding the time. But I want to put together a little, highlights package of the little snippets that I took of the different songs at the different points of in the set from all the different bands, because they all just sounded so good. So good. So wherever you are that you're listening to this, if you have the opportunity to go see Last Summer on Earth tour, I really encourage you to go do it. And even if it was something that wasn't on your radar, or maybe like me, you're like, I don't know, I'm not really into those bands necessarily. I'm telling you, do it. You will have such a good time. And I think they're only playing amphitheaters, and I just have always enjoyed that setting, or even just outdoors in general, because I think the first time I went to an outdoor show, and I could be wrong, was that Billy Idol Faith No More show at Lake Compounds in Connecticut. It's an amusement park that used to do these summer concert series. And I saw Poison there, and it was like Poison, I think, and Warrant, and I saw Tesla and Bullet Boys and David Lee Roth and Cinderella and like all those different bands. I love that outdoor environment because you got the breeze will come through at different points, and it's just such a really great night. And I just wanted to share that with all of you because it just fell in our laps, this opportunity, and it was equal parts nostalgia. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was a lot of nostalgia for my wife and almost something new for me, right? You don't always get those opportunities. And I think it's part of the maturation process as we get older, and the things that maybe we didn't listen to from our era, we've come to appreciate more now. At least I do. I'm sure there are more bands than just these three bands where I didn't listen to them back in the day, but now I do. Or a song comes on the radio, I'm like, oh, that's a great song that maybe I didn't appreciate at the time, or I was just being stupid and dismissive. I'm into indie music now. I can't like that. Blah, blah, blah. That idiotic stuff. Which many of us go through, right? It's like the whole hipster thing. I liked it before it was cool. Yeah, I saw Lenny Kravitz and Blind Melon in a tiny little club. Yay me. Great. Wonderful. Yeah, I've had that experience, but does it matter? It doesn't really matter now at 48 years old that I had that really cool experience back then. I'm belaboring the point. Nevertheless, go check out this tour. Seriously, go right now. So what are the remaining dates? I'm not getting paid to be, telling you their tour dates, but I feel compelled to do so. So anyone who wants to go ahead and, tag the band in it and say, hey, you're getting props here and you're getting some free press. So coming up Wednesday, July 13th, the tour will be in Baltimore, Maryland at the MECU Pavilion. Friday, July 15th, North Charleston Performing Arts Center, North Charleston, South Carolina. Saturday, July 16th, the Red Hat Amphitheater in Raleigh, North Carolina. Sunday, July 17th, the Wolf Trap in Vienna, Virginia. Tuesday, July 19th, Rose Music Center at the Heights, Huber Heights, Ohio. Wednesday, July 20th, the PNC Pavilion in Cincinnati, Ohio. I've heard great things about that particular place. And then they are headed back home to Canada, where they will be completing the summer They'll be completing the summer in Toronto, Saskatoon, Drumheller, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and finally, on September 4th, the tour will come to a close at the Alaska State Fair in Palmer, Alaska. So, if you are in any of those areas, seriously, go do it. And you can hear by the schedule, very few off days. And this tour, I think, started in June 3rd, I believe. And they still sounded killer. So no lost voices, nothing like that. Just full on rocking and rolling. Go do it. And if you know any guys in these bands, or you know anyone in any bands from our era, please tag them. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say I have some dream guests. Now, I'm not sure anyone can help make this happen, but I think that you have to put it out into the ether. So what I would like is to have Chris Jericho on the show, because he's currently, one of his side projects is a band called Quarantine, which is 80s no makeup Kiss, 80s, 90s Kiss, my era of Kiss. The Sweet Brothers from Stryper. Holy cow, please get them on the show. I'd really love to have them on the show. But really anyone from the era. If there's anyone that you know, shoot me an email. Love to hear from you and finding some opportunities to get some of these guys on the show. Because the only way it's truly going to grow is if I can get some great guests that you'd all be interested in hearing, that I'd be so thrilled to actually meet and talk to, even if it is only through Zoom. How do you email me? That's a great question. You can email me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at StuckPodX. And that whole YouTube problem has been rectified, where now full episodes are available without being broken out into individual episodes. Head on over to my Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if it is not available on a particular platform that you're interested in, hit me up in social media or via email, or head over to the main host of this podcast, which is Spreaker.com, where you're most easily able to find the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, and please leave 5-star reviews, because that helps to move things up in the algorithm. Speaking of algorithms, about a week ago, I hit that first barrier that you have in Facebook as far as where you are in search results and how often you appear in people's news feeds. And that is 100 likes, 100 followers. However, that is going all the way back to March of 2022, so this year. It took all that time to get to that 100 likes and follows. To show that the algorithm works, now, in about a week's time, I have over 200 likes and follows. So every interaction actually counts. So if you are enjoying the podcast and would like to see it grow and continue, please help me out. I really appreciate it. So, until next time, later, slackers.